Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming in and joining me today for this Vision House webinar, The Family Eviction Crisis. Vision House, in case you're not familiar, we partner with families to find a pathway out of homelessness into a fulfilling life with stable housing and a future for parents and children. My name is Derek Skiba. I'm the executive director of Vision House. This is a 35-year-old private Christian organization, nonprofit organization helping families in our community in the Seattle area with programs, transitional housing, childcare. We have a relational approach to see people as people, not just numbers or a person as a problem to be solved. And we want to help people address those underlying causes of homelessness. Vision House is a 4-star charity from Charity Navigator. I am joined by Bree Baines, our family transitions director. And Bree's team is the team that works with families currently experiencing homelessness or are on the verge of losing their housing. Hi, Bree. How's it going?
Hello, good.
So, we will be talking today about the family eviction crisis, and we'll answer questions. So, throw questions into the chat. There's a chat window right there. The Q&A, we'll monitor that as well, but try the chat. And we'd like to answer those questions as we go along. But first, what does eviction look like? This, as with any of us, we have our unique experiences in life, but eviction looks different for every family. A common denominator, though, it's incredibly disruptive and traumatizing. So, Bree, when a family comes into Vision House after having been evicted, what are some common experiences a family's had leading up to this event?
A lot of times it's loss of jobs, experiencing a ton of trauma of maybe loss of relationships. They first time experiencing homelessness and they have lost pretty much what they would call their normal. And they are in a state of kind of panic and what you would call like a freeze because they don't know what the next step is. And with having to navigate the systems that we have in place in the county.
There is no guidebook once you lose housing that will help you navigate all of the complexities of possible help. Uh, Talking to Vision House is about as close as you could get to a GPS to guide you through this process. But just to show you an example of a family, there was a story written about a family. This is the Smith family, Tawana and Akeem. This family lives in Las Vegas. We're sharing their story just as an example. Here's something that can happen. Tawana was managing a convenience store, but she was laid off. I infer from the family story that Akeem was caring for the kids, but this loss of a job meant that they couldn't keep up with their $1,400 monthly rent. And after fighting eviction for a time, they eventually gave up their home and moved into a hotel room with their 5 children. Imagine living in a hotel room with 5 children, ages 2 to 12. So there's a loss of home, but also a loss of stability, disruptions for education. But it's a defeating feeling going through an eviction. And take a look at this. I mean, hopefully you haven't personally experienced evictions, but this happens to so many families outside of this house. Families are often left with the choice of paying for movers or a van or having all of their worldly possessions dumped onto the street. And if you're behind on rent, there are huge financial pressures in your life, or else you wouldn't be behind. So paying for movers or storage is usually not an option. So often people will have no choice but to see everything they own dumped into a pile on the street, regardless of the season. So imagine we're expecting snow here in the Seattle area. My kids are hoping for that, but imagine if somebody's evicted this weekend and we have an inch or two of snow on the ground. And there goes your stuff, possibly onto the street. Nobody wants to experience this. And people are often left to fend for themselves and understanding their rights as renters. A UW Evans School study showed that 45% of tenants facing eviction in January 2024 had legal representation. So about half of people had no legal representation. And it's not just costly to tenants, evictions are costly to landlords as well. It's incredibly disruptive and costly. So there's processing fees with the court, there's lost rent, potential legal challenges. So the cost easily reaches into the thousands of dollars, oftentimes. An estimate from the financial institution TransUnion puts the cost to landlords at about $3,500. So lots of costs, lots of disruption, lots of trauma for families, and for that matter, housing providers. So let's just get a perspective here about how bad is it. And I was amazed to see Washington State, through the research we've done here, it's not the highest state in the country for evictions, but we are much worse than we have been in the past. Family homelessness is tracking up. Evictions are tracking up. So our data, 2024, it was a year of enormous need. A variety of government and nonprofit sources show this, and a need for families experiencing homelessness and this other layer of evictions. So we served a record amount of families in 2023. And then in 2024, again, a record amount, a 34% increase in new families reaching out to Vision House for help. And this is not 100 families that we're serving, it's not 200 families. Vision House helped more than 1,000 new families last year. And add on to that, more than 200 families that we've helped previously. So huge, huge numbers. Uh, and as part of this, a huge uptick in evictions. So over the last year, instead of about 10% of clients that Bree's team sees having evictions as part of their story, which was more normative for Vision House, but now we're seeing around 40% of clients over the last year have evictions as part of their story, leading to homelessness. And check out this scary chart here. So this is from the nonprofit Eviction Research Network. These are Washington State figures. During COVID, there was a moratorium on evictions. And you could see that significant dip in evictions in 2020 through 2022. But after COVID, after the moratorium and rental assistance ended, renters that were behind were processed through the legal system, and our region saw and is seeing record evictions, huge increase in 2023, and it's continued to today. And King County is one of 9 counties in Washington with record eviction numbers. 2024 has the highest court filing count for evictions in Washington State history. We want Washington State to stand out. This is not the area where we want to stand out. Maybe Apple production, I don't know, but this is really, really harmful for families. So I've just rolled through some really unfortunate statistics, but Bree, what is this? What do you make of this? And your just response to this, and then we could kind of go into why does eviction even happen?
Yeah, so the response has been of trying to figure out first what the root cause of the eviction was, and then we're seeing astronomical amounts and trying to figure out how can we work with landlords and or if it's already gone to collections and then new landlords. Because at the end of the day, we're seeing a huge amount of numbers of where it's between $20,000 to $40,000 because once the eviction starts, due to COVID, a lot of landlords got burned. The articles were saying, and so like during that, like there was a lot of mistrust there, and
Mm-hmm.
so landlords stopped taking payments and
Mm-hmm.
they had to pay in full, where then the
Wow.
families fell behind
Right.
and they couldn't pay in full. So then late fees were getting added to it. And then like things just kept doubling up. And then again, I spoke earlier is that the free, they just froze. Like, how do I get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
And in their minds, they're like, when you're in a fight or flight mode, you're like, I'm just gonna go. Like they don't know their rights, they don't know their options, they don't
Mm-hmm.
know what different things they could do. In their minds, like I can't make payments, so I need to go. And so that's where we're trying to come in and work with them and talk about now, even if they're not in the housing, what are options that they have? How can we support in navigating this? Are there ways that we can negotiate
Hmm.
it down? Because
Hmm.
with the evictions, it is
Hmm.
hard. It's harder to get into housing right now, unless they've been paid off. Um,
So let's talk about why eviction happens. So we heard the story about the Smith family. You lose a job, you have a medical crisis, lots of bills, and as Bree was saying, landlords can reach a point to where, okay, I have had enough with this uncertainty. You either pay or leave. Understandable if you're in a business, but the reality for families is they were already behind. How are they going to come up with thousands of dollars in back payment in order to keep their housing? So eviction happens as a common denominator in this financial aspect. But let's look at this next slide here. Washington State has a 2.1% eviction rate. So that means 1 out of 50 renters are evicted. And as I noted, this isn't the worst in the US actually, but it is really bad compared to norms here in Washington. And this is the common denominator here. 46%, about 1 in 2 renters are rent burdened. So you're spending too much than the recommended percentage of your income toward rent. So just the nature of living in a very expensive place is it's the oxygen in which renters and for that matter homeowners live in. It is really expensive to live here. So something goes wrong. Uh, yeah, Bree, how do you see finances often unravel for families?
well, one thing, it's expensive to live here, but it's also really expensive to get into something here. And
Mm,
so even if you're making what maybe you could potentially live in something, you have to come up with half time almost for an apart like for a home, if you have a bigger family, it could be up to almost $5,000 to even move in.
mm.
Um, for Washington, I think that we are I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
Well, let's just look at some of the numbers here. The number one reason is lack of housing people can't afford.
Yeah.
So fair market value for a two-bedroom apartment, I just checked these stats just last night. It's almost $3,000 here in Renton, where our Vision House headquarters is, for a two-bedroom apartment. And then you look at total monthly income at our high for national averages, high minimum wage. You're only about what, $700 different between rent and total monthly income. And if we're talking about families with kids, imagine you have a little kid, you need childcare, like it starts to make zero financial sense.
Mhm.
So it is no wonder that families have to work two jobs. If you have a two-income family, fantastic. But yeah, families are struggling in our community. But then you introduce these other factors like health concerns, disability, domestic violence, unemployment, mental illness, substance abuse. There are racial disparities when you look at the data. 1 in 6 African American adults are evicted in Pierce County, according to Eviction Lab. So there's a lot here. But just to say, if you are not making a ton of money, it is difficult to live here. And it is no wonder we have a growing eviction rate in our area. But let's talk about impacts for eviction. So this is not just losing your home. This is a hit on your record. What are the implications for having an eviction on your record, Bree?
Yeah, a lot of times, a lot of apartments won't allow evictions within the last 2 to 3 years, which obviously like we're talking about. There's a lot of evictions going on right now. It can obviously a negative impact on your credit, making it hard to get a lot of different things in life, like if you're trying to get a car or whatnot. But evictions make it almost 2 to 3 times more harder for families to get into anything unless we could find a private landlord who's willing to look past it. Luckily, we do have a partnership with an agency that's been a little bit helpful with this when it comes to like higher rate housing when families are making a little bit more money. But we are having to spend a lot more time with families right now in the diversion centers trying to figure out how to get these evictions paid off. So families are experiencing homelessness longer due to having to wait until we can get the debt paid down to at least maybe 2 to 3 thousand before a landlord's willing to look at them.
So not only is a family who is not making a ton of money needing to pay money for rent as they get into a place, they're also having to pay back rent in order to even qualify for a place for a landlord to talk to them.
Mm.
So when you're already strapped, additional financial
Yeah.
strain and additional risk for a
Yeah.
family in case something goes wrong. And something that I found really uh, sobering, there's a book that I would recommend if you're interested in learning more about evictions and the how especially poor families are hurt by evictions and in the areas in which they can rent, but also in the price to pay for rent. So this book, Evicted by Matthew Desmond, highly recommend this book just to go a little bit deeper here in just some of the findings that he had both through research but also living with families going through housing uncertainty and evictions. Families in Milwaukee, where he was doing a lot of his research, they were paying very comparable rents to live in terrible conditions as families who had no evictions were paying for good neighborhoods and good conditions. So you have uncertainty in your neighborhood, you have the potential of violence, not great schools, and you're living in a really unfortunate place and you're paying near the same rent as a family with no eviction. So huge implications for both comfort, but also the future of developing a safe and stable family dynamic in the future. So how does Vision House help through this? We are an organization that singularly focuses on families. How do we help with this? Uh, let's start with some of the short-term needs and our work with families through our diversion centers. Bree, what's diversion? How do we work through this?
Yeah, so I think with diversion, we have families coming into our set. We try to get every family into our centers at one of three locations: Shoreline, Renton, or Burien. First, we want to create a safe place for them and that they feel comfortable. Because at the end of the day, for us to support them, especially through high evictions, we got to need to know the little bit of details of what happened and then how can we move forward and to ensure that we want to make sure we set them up for success. And we want to ensure it doesn't happen again. So we kind of set up goals and whatnot. And then we look at get the paperwork for the eviction and what happened, look at the ledgers, see where they fell behind, and then make a game plan with the client because it is client led. We want them to have them to feel empowered to like they know what needs to happen, but it's scary calling a landlord or a debt collector. But we want them to know that we're there with them the 100% of the time and we make those calls with them and also advocate for them. We've seen a lot of times when it comes to these circumstances is that it's helpful when you have an advocate with you
Mhm.
and speaking with you, that you're heard a little bit more. And so we've gone to meetings with them in person. We support them and sometimes we'll drive because sometimes the anxiety of talking to somebody about this is a lot. And so we'll go to them with their appointments. And then also we've helped negotiate the money down. We've also, when they've been not really helpful on that end, we've seen the plan, we've seen what the clients are making now. We know that they've worked through some of their trauma. They're still continuing to work through it, but they're in a good spot and they have been for a while. Like, let's try to figure out how we can get you into an apartment. So
Mhm.
there's my staff has been doing really well, going to new apartments and help empowering the clients and like helping them be honest with the landlords. Like, this is what happened. This is how this happened.
Mhm.
This is who I'm working with. And we created a new position this year of like we have somebody following families for a
Mhm.
year after they've been placed into permanent housing through diversion, and it's like
Mhm.
they'll have support
Mhm.
with them while they're in housing, just in case something happens. Our goal is for that not to happen, self-sufficiency to
Mhm.
happen, but they will always have the support, and I think that that it's showing the clients that they can do this, but having that supportive
Mhm.
person there the entire time has made a world of difference. And even where we still have some of the clients calling us once in a while,
Mm.
and just letting us know that they're still in the permanent housing
Wow.
has been really cool to hear. But the whole goal of the centers is to be a safe space for someone just to unload of what's happened to them and tell us how we can help them, and let's set a plan up together.
The relational aspect of this, if someone had another option that was a viable option, had one more person to call to stay with, had one more friend to call to stay with, they probably wouldn't be calling Vision House. So having a loving, caring, informed partner to navigate through the complexities of this is so valuable. Also, at our diversion centers, these three centers in Shoreline, Renton, and Burien, we offer showers and laundry. At most of the centers, we're working on a new center in Shoreline where we'll be able to offer laundry, a hot meal and coffee if a family's hungry. There's a space for kids to play, but it's that case management and sorting through that. So when you look at these photos of our centers, you could see this is designed to be warm and welcoming for families and to not seem like a government office. Nothing wrong with government offices, but we can only take so much fluorescent light in our lives, and we want it to feel more like home, and we want it to feel like a place where a family can breathe a bit and actually plan for the future. Because when you're going through trauma, you're looking at the next few hours, maybe the next couple of days, but looking farther into the future. That's where we want to be with families, to look farther into the future. Bree, can you share a story of a family we have helped at Vision House? Share a story of impact, because there's been so many families that have come through with these really complex, challenging situations with evictions on their records.
Yeah, so there's a couple. One, is that we've been off and on. A family got put into permanent housing. In the beginning, it wasn't through us, but they called us when they were getting into falling behind. They were eventually evicted, and because they so we were supporting them on trying to figure out to negotiate. They were at 5,000. We knew a lot of landlords wouldn't be okay with that amount. And so we negotiated down to 4,000, and the family was able to come up with 1,000. And with one of our community partners, we were able to get them into permanent housing with the $3,000 in debt, but also showing with working with the client and coming up with a payment plan
Mm-hmm.
that is comfortable for them with what they're making now, and that they can still survive, and not just survive, but thrive still.
Mm-hmm.
And they are in permanent housing now, making the payment plans, and we are checking in with them probably a little bit more because they are newer into making a payment plan on their past eviction and then paying rent. But they are a family that we just housed in this last 2 weeks.
Mm.
And then,
Tell us about what the like. Is this mom and one kid, several kids? What was that like? What are ages? Where
yeah,
were
it
they
was a
living?
two-parent family, two kiddos, and basically what happened is there was dad got injured at work. Unfortunately, LNI was denied, and mom had been a stay-at-home mom and was not able to find a job, but also needed to take care of him. And so
Wow.
they just fell. They had never before that. They had never um, fell behind on rent. And yeah, and so they just kind of everything just kind of toppled onto each other, and they were able to get out of it before it got too high.
Mm-hmm.
The rent debt got too high, but they didn't know how to move forward after that.
Right. Because we need a navigator, we need a friend, someone who we can trust. And landlords, they want to do the right thing. We need great partners in property management. And we have great partners who are willing to work with us, and they know that they're getting support from Vision House. They have more trust when they're working with Vision House and a client than just a client calling on their own. But this is something that is growing in complexity. Bree was telling me today that sometimes family have $20,000 in debt, $40,000 in debt. Can you imagine? Almost at any income level, that's a lot of debt to be confronted with. So we're helping families trying to see what are the viable next steps to get through these really difficult circumstances. Also at Vision House offers transitional housing. So our family program team at Vision House offers an array of services as you're in transitional housing for about a year here at Vision House, and you're able to go through with a lease and rebuild your rental history credit. We have holistic programming, childcare through Children's Village, amazing childcare for both our residents here at Vision House and also the community. There's openings at Children's Village in Shoreline and in Renton, but most importantly, case management, sorting through all those complexities. And this is holistic programming. So we walk with people, literally in this case, and we offer therapy, assistance, educational resources, how to keep a home, cooking, budgeting, you name it. Just this morning, uh, my my wife is starting to volunteer here, and she could help people with finances. There's another person helping with finances who's a volunteer here at Vision House who's new. Just helping with budgeting is critical because we want it to work in month 2, month 6, month 12, and on. And you need a budget, you need a plan, and that takes a lot of work and wisdom. And as noted, this case management is key in our family programs. Incredible, dedicated, experienced staff. This is Stacy here, and it's how we're able to graduate 90% of our families through our transitional housing program into permanent housing. So I want to pause there and see if there are any questions that we can answer from the chat. So, all right. So the cause of eviction is the markets. Uh, the markets will determine how much landlords can make. So at this point, I'm not sure if Paul, you're imagining like caps on rent increases, that sort of thing. What is incredibly valuable is having enough rental assistance available for extremely low income families. So that is a key tool of ours that we certainly hope will continue to be a tool for families who are struggling. Yeah, I think the landlords, they have to be able to work through and to see their bottom line as well. Public housing, yes. You want to speak to that, Bree? Just like what's available now, just like a couple of the options that you look at for families of very low income.
Yeah, so there are two types of housing we tend to look at when it comes to lower income families, and it's what we call PBVs, which is project-based vouchers, which is where some folks might be familiar with Section 8. And it's basically where the voucher stays with the apartment, it's not with the person. And so those wait lists can be pretty long because it's 30% of their income. And so those are all across Washington. And so we always look at where families are willing to go and get them on those lists. There's also apartments called tax credit. They are lower than market rate. They tend to be a little bit higher. So families do need to have somewhat of a good income to be able to afford it. But they are going to be, there's a maximum of what people can make to be able to go into those apartments to try to keep them affordable.
There has to be tools in order for families to stay housed in our community. Those tools include the teaching, the encouragement, the job training, the empowerment. But it's been incredibly valuable to have rental assistance in some form for families in our incredibly expensive place. A couple of other questions here. How do clients needing assistance find Vision House? So oftentimes a family needing help who is experiencing homelessness will call 211. Mary's Place is a partner of ours. They often will send referrals over to us. We're partnered with Seattle's Union Gospel Mission. There's a comment here from a friend at Everett Gospel Mission. This is a bunch of great agencies working together and trying to solve family homelessness. Vision House provides awesome case management, and we are at the front line of, especially within our huge growth and diversion, of being able to help so many more families just navigate all of this complexity. So uh, yeah, you want to answer a couple of those other questions, Bree? Oh, contact a volunteer. So please donate. Please volunteer. We have lots of opportunities for both. Go to visionhouse.org and donate and volunteer. So on average, $60 provides a night of safety to a family. On average, to run one of those eviction frontline centers, the diversion centers here in our area, it's about $1,000. So if that's something that you'd be interested in, please explore that. Any closing thoughts here? Anything else you'd like to answer, Bree, before we end?
Yeah, a couple of the questions that were in Q&A, and I apologize that we didn't see those sooner, is what are one or two things that would, as members of the community to support families at risk of eviction? One, I know that this might seem simple, but it's just know that there's probably a story behind it,
Mm,
and that it's not due to one or two simple things. I think that knowing, seeing if the family has resources, if not, getting them connected to us or another agency that works with families. Because I think what's hard, like I've been talking about, is it's hard to navigate on their own. Evictions are scary, and sometimes talking to landlords is hard. And so just getting them connected to somebody if they are wanting an advocate. And even if
mhm,
they have questions and they don't know what that could look like, is getting them connected to somebody so they can ask questions.
mhm,
Um, the others, like if you know of any landlords who are willing to support agencies like us and would be willing to have conversations, have them get connected with us. Just because we do have the supported services that are available to families who we do place into permanent housing.
mhm,
And are we working with organizations combating costs of housing and living? I think that, not at a government level, but I am a part of a lot of meetings and conversations about
mhm,
what's going on, what are we seeing? And the conversation always is cost of living is really high, cost of housing is really high. And so we are a part of those important conversations, but not necessarily is it like a full-blown partnership, but
mhm,
trying to make sure that if we're not at the table every time, we're at least having a voice in the room.
mhm. So we need more housing that people can afford. So we are in a relationship with a property developer that is intending to build those tax credit permanent housing opportunities for families at that 30% AMI. So these are families that, unless there is some other support, they're probably sleeping in their car to be able to be inside. And so being a part of partnerships like that, supporting smaller apartments being built in your community, affordable apartments. If you have space to build something in your backyard, if you have another room that you could rent out, those are all viable options to, person by person, help provide more housing for families in our community. So thank you, everyone, for coming here to our webinar today. And just God bless you for your care for neighbors. And please check us out at visionhouse.org. Reach out to me and would love to chat, and we'll give you a tour. Thanks.